Is anyone still celebrating? St George, once a unifier, finds himself in the middle of a cultural battleground, a symbol that once defined England, now raising questions about what England even is. In this series, we followed that journey from medieval battlefields to the weary aftermath of the Second World War. We've seen how England built an identity around him, and how that identity changed with every passing age. But now, we step into a different chapter, the era of living memory. Here the story becomes less certain. History and tradition give way to modern politics and its dogmas. But while national identity is argued over, it lives or dies in ordinary rituals. So before we untangle the ideology, before we dissect the nuances of post-war identity, we need to begin somewhere simpler. What really happens on St George's Day? Or has it simply been forgotten? Let's get right into it, starting with something measurable, something unambiguous. How many people actually know the date? In fact, before we go any further, let me ask you, yes, you, without looking it up, do you know the date of St George's Day? Be honest, let me know in the comments, and no cheating if you've just come from another video in the series. It's the 23rd of April, a date that once needed no reminder. But if you didn't know that off the top of your head, don't worry, you're far from alone.
Do you know when St George's Day is?
No.
No.
I don't.
Don't know.
I don't really know, to be honest.
I don't even know when it is.
It's not today, is it?
Is it today?
No. Is it next week?
It certainly
This is the thing, I
feels
don't even
like
know.
St George's Day has been forgotten. But is that impression borne out by evidence? To find out, I wanted to go beyond anecdote and see what data has actually been collected. It's patchy, to say the least, but what does exist tells a very revealing story. So let's begin with awareness. How many people in England do know the day? Well, back in 2001, fewer than half, just 44%, could correctly name the date. A year later, a survey found 1/3 of respondents didn't know the famous story of St George slaying the dragon. Among 18 to 24-year-olds, 1 in 10 only recognised the name from a local pub. By 2008, little had improved. Only 48% of 18 to 34-year-olds could identify St George's Day from a given list of dates. Even more striking, 70% were unaware of any local events taking place on the 23rd of April. That last figure is important. If 7 in 10 people don't know of any celebrations, it suggests something beyond individual forgetfulness. It points to a broader absence of any visible public tradition. By 2009, surveys suggested a staggering 70% of young people now didn't know the date, highlighting that newer generations weren't being passed the baton that might keep St George's Day alive. The pattern continued into 2013, where we have some interesting comparisons. While 71% of respondents could correctly identify the date of America's Independence Day,
4th of July.
only 40% knew St George's Day. Even St Patrick's Day was more widely recognised by the English, at 42%. So it made sense when 2/3 of respondents said it was celebrated more enthusiastically in England than England's own national day.
I probably celebrate St Patrick's Day more than St George's Day.
Do you celebrate St Patrick's Day?
We did, in great fashion.
Maybe in good fashion, yeah.
Paddy's Day is bigger than George's Day.
There's something about it, I think celebrating someone else's is, I don't know, there's something about it, it's nice.
Taken together, these figures suggest that recognition of St George's Day has long been inconsistent and often surprisingly low. And this wasn't just true of the public. In 2010, during a Labour leadership debate,
asking the candidates there, are they in touch question.
only 2 of the 5 candidates could name St George's Day correctly.
Ed Miliband didn't get that one. Andy Burnham didn't get that one. Diane Abbott says it's soon.
If England recognises other countries' national days before its own, and even those vying for national leadership struggle to recall the date, what does that say about the day's place in England's shared cultural consciousness? Well, the picture becomes sharper when we compare England with its neighbours. In the same 2013 survey, while only 40% of English adults could name the date of St George's Day, 78% of Welsh respondents could do the same for St David's Day. That's not a marginal difference, it's nearly double. Now let's go deeper. Awareness is only one measure. Engagement tells us even more. A 2010 poll found that 40% didn't know why St George was England's patron saint.
Is it the guy who beat the dragon?
Yeah, he slayed a dragon or something like that. Slayed a dragon, come on. I'm sure that was why, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean.
In the same year, 12% admitted feeling embarrassed by the St George's Cross, more than 1 in 10 willing to express discomfort with their own national flag. and this ambivalence has persisted. In a 2024 YouGov poll, 24% of adults in England said they had an unfavourable view of people flying the England flag.
People probably see the British, the George Cross flag as something a bit scary, probably, I don't know. I think it's a bit like a bit English. It's a bit...
I would choose not to fly a flag or be associated with it at all.
Among political subgroups, that disapproval was even higher. 44% of 2019 Labour voters had a negative view, compared with just 9% of Conservative voters.
It's heavily associated with racism and far-right groups.
I've had flags torn down, people run off with them shouting racist. Obviously they can't rip that one down and run away with it.
But this contention isn't new. Back in 2010, a report commissioned by This England magazine found that 6% of English men and women were, quote, scared to fly the St George's Cross, while 1 in 6 feared they'd be told to take it down. Clearly, for many, the flag isn't just a neutral symbol. It carries social tension, making public expressions of English identity fraught on multiple sides.
I don't think we've got a real English identity.
One study even characterised the English as the least patriotic nation in Europe. The survey questioned nearly 6,000 adults across 9 European countries, including Scotland, Wales, and the Republic of Ireland. English respondents rated their patriotism at just 5.8 out of 10, the lowest of the 9 nations. The Netherlands topped the list at 7.18. Although slightly lower than Scotland and Wales, Ireland was also the nation where people were most likely to display their national flag, a visible everyday mark of pride that helps explain why St Patrick's Day continues to thrive. Ipsos polls also saw a rise between 2013 and 2022 in the number that agreed an England flag on a home, car, shop or pub was a worrying expression of English nationalism, up from 11% to 17%.
Wrath of St George, got a pretty bad name for itself, right?
All in all, these figures show that England's national symbols and identity often fail to inspire the same pride or participation seen elsewhere. It's not simply a matter of forgetting the date. For many, the symbol itself is contested, uncomfortable, or just plain invisible. And that is the cultural landscape in which St George's Day struggles to make itself felt today. The story, however, is not entirely one of decline. Ipsos polls in 2012 and 2022 painted a somewhat more encouraging picture. Around 62 to 63% of respondents could identify the correct date from a list of options. Recognition, at least in multiple choice form, may be slightly stronger than earlier surveys suggested. And yet, even during periods of heightened national debate, including the years surrounding Brexit, St George's Day itself remained largely peripheral in public discourse. The data doesn't point to total disappearance, but it doesn't indicate a vibrant national ritual either. Right, you can put away your calculator for now. The question we're left with is why? Why this continued disconnection? Why has St George's Day become so irrelevant, especially compared to other national holidays? Many just don't seem that bothered.
St George's Day?
Is it? I just don't really think anyone's that bothered about it.
St George's Day I think that was gone long ago, wasn't it? Like, no one's celebrating that.
When generation after generation has grown up with a day their parents barely remember, is it any wonder young people don't care when nobody's ever told them why they should? We're used to remembering dates that carry consequence. Dates when it matters if they're missed, whether personal, like deadlines, rent or exams, or social, through shared expectation. Bank holidays, Christmas, Halloween, when the rhythm of the world around us changes and makes us remember. Perhaps a saint in the 21st century doesn't quite carry the same sense of urgency, but the stark contrast with Wales suggests something deeper at play. If it was simply modern indifference to a more religious past, we'd expect to see similar figures across the UK. And we don't. Could the struggle be something more specific to St George's Day itself? To answer that, and to understand England's challenges, we need to step back and consider the bigger picture. Our neighbours, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, each have their own saints' days. How do these nations approach their celebrations? And what lessons might they hold for the curious case of St George's Day? It's time to put England in context. Perhaps the most striking contrast is St Patrick's Day, the biggest and most internationally recognised celebration in all of Ireland. It's an official public holiday in both the Republic and Northern Ireland, and the celebrations spill far beyond the 17th of March, especially in bigger cities. In Dublin, the St Patrick's Festival runs for several days, drawing crowds of around 500,000. Parades, concerts, fireworks, light shows, traditional music and dance. The economic impact is enormous. Pubs and bars packed with locals and tourists alike as domestic spending surges across the country. Guinness, Irish whiskey and Irish coffee, consumed at home and exported worldwide, generate serious revenue as cultural symbols that only reinforce Ireland's global brand. In Ireland, celebration and commerce go hand in hand. Beyond Ireland, the scale only grows. Thanks to centuries of emigration, the Irish identity has been exported all across the world. In New York, the St. Patrick's Day Parade attracts over 2 million spectators. Chicago dyes its river green. Boston, Sydney, and dozens of other major cities host parades and festivals. And participation isn't limited to Irish neighbourhoods. The holiday's symbols are instantly recognisable worldwide. Even those without Irish ancestry routinely take part in countless countries. Even in England, the day is widely celebrated.
Why are you out here celebrating St Paddy's Day?
Paddy's Day, innit? We're all here, Irish. Get up there, the boy.
For Irish, innit, bruv? For Irish. Got to be done on it. Paddy's Day happens once a year. It's the best weekend.
Absolutely love it. It's the best day of the year for me. Yeah, really.
For a variety of reasons.
I just like getting pissed.
Back in Ireland, beyond the spectacle, tradition still matters. Some start the day with a hearty Irish breakfast. In more devout communities, church services, or even pilgrimages to holy sites still play a role. St Patrick's Day is a commercial and cultural juggernaut, but it hasn't lost its religious or national significance. That endurance isn't accidental. Ireland's Catholic history didn't just preserve saints' days, it embedded them into civic life. Unlike England, where Protestant reformers downplayed saints' days and stripped them of institutional support, Irish Catholicism ensured St Patrick's Day remained both a religious observance and a state-backed national celebration. That continuity, cultural, religious, and institutional, is something England never fully replicated. Next up, Scotland. While it's not the internationally famous moneymaker St Patrick's Day has become, St Andrew's Day carries a strong sense of patriotic pride and cultural preservation, closer in spirit to Burns Night or Hogmanay, a proud celebration rather than a commercial festival. As such, it's now been recognised as a national bank holiday for nearly 20 years. That status didn't come overnight. Earlier attempts had been made, but it wasn't until the creation of the Scottish Parliament that sustained efforts to make St Andrew's Day a bank holiday really gathered momentum. After years of lobbying, the campaign finally succeeded in 2007. And the Scots haven't wasted that win. They make the most of November the 30th, with major cities leading the way. In Edinburgh, the day brings ceilidhs, concerts and fireworks over the castle, alongside exhibitions at the National Museum and commemorative services at the Scottish Parliament. Glasgow's Torchlight Parade winds through the city, accompanied by lantern-making workshops, live music and community dances, while Aberdeen marks a day with parades, concerts and themed dinners celebrating Scottish food and whisky. Again, the famous alcohol industry gets in on the action, blending cultural heritage with tourism through tastings and distillery tours across the country. Even rural and island communities get involved. Large hoolie gatherings, vibrant festivals of Scottish music and dance take place from Oban to Dundee, blending folk music, ceilidh bands and community festivities. Around this time, the Scots Trad Music Awards often coincide with St Andrew's Day, further linking the national day to Scotland's living cultural traditions. If you're not familiar with the Scottish folk scene, they've got some very good music. In short, Scotland may not have Ireland's global reach, but unlike England, it's embedded its patron saint's day into civic life. Political recognition, cultural investment, and community participation ensure that St Andrew's Day is visible, meaningful, and celebrated year after year. Across Scotland and Ireland, these days don't just arrive, they reshape the week. Work patterns shift, schools, streets and schedules all make space. The day is marked, felt and lived. By contrast, in England, the 23rd of April passes like any other working day. It's neatly slotted into the calendar, but never allowed to disrupt it. No national rhythm, no cultural build-up, no bank holiday. Wales too has never been granted a national bank holiday for St David's Day, but that hasn't dampened Welsh pride. If anything, it's sharpened it. Awareness is high, as we've seen, and public support for a holiday is clear. Yet the power to create new bank holidays remains with Westminster, which has repeatedly rejected calls to make the 1st of March official. Still, Welsh institutions and local authorities have found ways to fill the gap. In 2022, for example, Gwynedd Council gave staff the day off, while campaigns for wider recognition continue to gather momentum. Choirs, dancers and traditional dress fill the streets, while schools put children at the heart of the day. They wear daffodils and leeks, perform traditional songs and plays, and learn about St David, passing on tradition and keeping the day alive. The largest celebrations take place in Cardiff, where the St David's Day parade and festival draws tens of thousands. Smaller cities like Wrexham and Swansea add their own parades and community events, with music, Welsh food and crafts. Even without a bank holiday, the Welsh dragon flies from government buildings and businesses, a confident, visible symbol of national identity, a clear contrast with England's cautious approach to the St George's Cross. Media amplifies the day, not just within Wales, with broadcasters running documentaries, concerts and special programming celebrating Welsh history and culture. Speaking of which, Eisteddfodau, competitions in music, poetry and performance often pop up around St David's Day, reinforcing community engagement, echoing the larger national Eisteddfod each summer. And like St Patrick's, participation even stretches beyond the country. Dydd Gwyl Dewi Hapus is widely exchanged, as Welsh communities across the United States, Canada and even Argentina continue to mark the day with pride. What Wales demonstrates is crucial. A national day doesn't need a bank holiday to thrive. Through education, media visibility, local government action, and sheer force of cultural willpower, St David's Day has been embedded across generations, a lesson England might do well to note. Speaking of which, finally, England. What does England actually do? Some people might know about sporting a red rose, or maybe wearing something blue. Perhaps they remember the odd beer commercial from 10, 15 years ago.
What's up for his tail? That's not his tail. Come on, big boy.
But honestly, I wasn't even aware of half of these before I did the research. You just don't see it around. Not in most places. Sure, there are pockets, maybe the odd flag here and there, but across the country, there's no unifying sense of occasion, no strong cultural imprint, certainly nothing like what we see with our Irish, Scottish or Welsh neighbours. And it's not just me who's noticed.
Yeah, I've not seen anything about, I don't think the country really does anything.
Do you think you'd know if it was St Patrick's Day?
Yes.
It's a conundrum, innit? Why don't we celebrate St George's Day like the rest of people celebrate their Saints' Days or National Days or whatever? We haven't got anything like that.
Should be celebrated a lot more. You get St David's Day gets celebrated, Burns Day, you get everything, but we don't celebrate St George's Day whatsoever.
I don't think we celebrate it enough. I admire the Welsh, the Scots and the Irish, and yet we seem to do very little, and It's so sad.
And many people simply don't bother.
Won't be doing much for it, no.
I probably won't be celebrating it, to be honest, yeah.
And again, this isn't just opinion. The numbers back it up. A 2014 survey by English Heritage found that fewer than 1 in 5 English adults plan to celebrate St George's Day that year. By 2022, the numbers speak for themselves. In short, nearly half of English adults plan to do nothing at all. And the rest mostly go down the pub.
Probably go to the pub for a pint.
I'll probably be on the piss anyway, so it doesn't make a difference to me.
I'll probably be having a pint, but that's nothing to do with George.
Happy St George's Day.
A standard Thursday night in England. St George's Day doesn't just lack enthusiasm, it lacks obligation, leaving England with no obvious national day, no English 4th of July, no fireworks across the country to honour a momentous occasion from the nation's past. Curiously, the closest thing might be Guy Fawkes Night, when instead of marking a historic uprising, we celebrate the moment one failed. Yet of all the UK nations, England's patron saint has arguably the most iconic story.
The guy who beat the dragon.
Yeah, he slayed a dragon or something like that.
Yeah, he killed a dragon.
He deserves a pint.
Pretty epic.
And its flag, contested though it may be, is also one of the most recognisable in the world. A flag without a festival. So what's the problem? Ireland thrives. Scotland has its bank holiday. Wales makes do. Could the difference simply be cultural will? Well, when you dig a little deeper, St George's Day almost seems designed to be unpopular. At first glance, it's a holiday people barely notice, and for many that's true. But for some, it goes beyond indifference. It stretches to outright opposition. Every year, without fail, St George's Day provokes a mini cultural tempest online and in the media. Even the smallest mentions spark debate. For a country that loves to complain about the weather, it seems almost fitting that England's most reliable St George's Day tradition is complaining about St George's Day. Local papers publish throwaway pieces asking the perennial question, why isn't St George's Day a bank holiday? And those who disapprove don't hold back. The negative responses typically fall into a few recurring narratives. St George is actually a multicultural icon. St George's Day is racist, a rallying point for extremists. Sometimes we need to just bury it and find something better to celebrate. And sometimes we need to reclaim St George from the far right. Meanwhile, Twitter lights up the moment someone posts Happy St George's Day. People might not remember the date, but the responses are well rehearsed. Some insist we should have stuck with a different patron. St Edmund, St Cuthbert, even St Alban all get name dropped. Others point out that St George wasn't English at all, that he never even set foot in England, often attempting to paint the story in just the right way to get under people's skin. And then there's the classic correction. Well, technically, it's not today. A nod to shifting church calendars. Often less a helpful reminder than one more way to undermine the day's legitimacy. And while, like last year, 2025, that point is grounded in fact, many churches and communities still observe St George's Day on its traditional date, particularly where the saint holds local significance. Officially, though, it's true that Easter and regular Sunday services take priority. Without a bank holiday or strong civic tradition to anchor him, his day often gets crowded out, both in church and in public life. Elsewhere, secular traditions keep him firmly rooted on the 23rd of April. We'll look at Barcelona next time. But in England, the saint isn't central enough religiously, and the day isn't important enough culturally. It's a catch-22. Without civic weight, it slips in church calendars. Without church recognition, it's easier for the public to overlook. A classic case of the serpent eating its own tail. Once England had both, a mandated day off and widespread celebration, the church marks St George's Day as a major double feast, a level of importance rarely seen outside Christmas and Easter. Compare that to today. St George barely clings to the bottom rung of the liturgical ladder, and public attention is even harder to find. Even if he does still make the occasional TV appearance. Sometimes favourably.
People across England celebrating their patron saint in all kinds of ways.
There's also been some George-themed yarn bombing in Cornwall. I love this.
Often not.
What I associate with it is thuggery, football hooligans and racial discrimination.
The Crusades to normal people sound frankly ridiculous.
To white people that might sound ridiculous, but to normal people that I know that sounds perfectly reasonable.
That's when he does get the airtime. For at least the past decade, the alleged media blackout hasn't gone unnoticed. Back in 2015, The Guardian pointed out the contrast. While hashtag St George's Day was trending online, not a single national newspaper acknowledged what day it was on the front page. Even Google was doing a better job over in Silicon Valley. As The Guardian put it, it revealed a disconnect between the priorities of the country's biggest media and the surge of British nationalism which has begun to accompany St George's Day in recent years. By 2021, criticism had become more direct. The BBC faced backlash over its lack of coverage, eventually issuing an apology. And the tensions haven't been confined to traditional media. In recent years, users have shared screenshots of St George's Day content being restricted or removed on social platforms. Facebook, in particular, drew criticism after posts celebrating the day were flagged, resulting in 24-hour bans for some and even 30-day restrictions for others. The stated reason? Your post goes against our community standards on dangerous individuals and organisations. Right, and the debate continues. In 2025, political commentator Aman Bagal accused parts of the establishment media and current government of portraying the English flag negatively, arguing that it contributes to a wider sense of division. Judging by the reporting and polling we've seen, it's a claim that certainly resonates with some of the wider trends, despite some of Keir Starmer's efforts to be seen to get on board. Together, this discourse forms a quickly forgotten, yet all too familiar cultural battlefield, one that returns each April like clockwork, mainstream outlets and platforms on one side, and a seemingly fringe minority pushing upstream to make the day happen. Year after year, as local outlets recycle the same bank holiday question, St George's Day is framed as irrelevant, unworthy, and outdated. A chorus of negative voices discouraging participation before it even begins. To anyone caught in the fray, all of this might start to feel like a coordinated attack from the establishment. But then again, maybe not. Maybe they're right. Surely if people really wanted to celebrate, they would. Surely, if a bank holiday mattered to the public, we'd have one by now. Scotland does. It has for nearly 20 years, and without a visible groundswell to catch the attention of the powers that be. Why bother? Those that could make it official won't act without a mandate, and the people have spoken. Haven't they? Well, in true St George fashion, it seems there may have been more of a battle going on than we've been led to believe. The contention around St George's Day isn't confined to words. In 2024, a St George's Day celebration turned rally made that tension apparent in the streets of Whitehall, where Tommy Robinson took to the stage. A figure long flagged by Facebook as one of the dangerous individuals they were committed to keeping off the platform. And fresh from a dispersal order violation acquittal, one many people had shown up to support.
But what the judge has ruled today is that the arrest was unlawful. They had no authorisation.
The turnout was substantial and the speeches well attended, but mainstream outlets gave the bulk of the event little attention. Cautious editorial judgment can, of course, come into play. Giving airtime to certain opinions might look like platforming extremist views to a general audience. Still, that convenient, plausible deniability creates a persistent blind spot, leaving people at home to fill in the blanks.
If you asked me 3 years ago what I thought of Tommy Robinson, I wouldn't have been very nice. But I stopped believing what the mainstream media said, and I actually looked on the internet and found videos from him, tried to look for some racist things he'd said or done, and there aren't any out there.
Many were simply there to celebrate St George's Day. Others added a political slant. Speeches from nationalist voices, or quiet protests of ULEZ or London Mayor Sadiq Khan's policies. Coverage that did appear leaned heavily into that political angle.
People could say that there's connotations of racism, for example, with people here. What do you think of that?
I've not felt any racism here. There might be a few racists here, but there's always good and bad in every group.
While the speeches themselves went largely unreported. Make of that what you will.
When it happens to me, people know about it. How many British patriots, how many nationalists, how many people who love their country are coming under attack by the police, are losing their jobs, are being censored, and no one even knows their stories.
Outlets like Politics Joe, in their Extreme Britain segment, spotlighted some of the less articulate moments in the crowd.
Can you talk me through your outfit?
Well, the outfit is just St George's battle dress.
If the West isn't careful, that political correctness itself will become a communism.
A reminder that passion doesn't always come in polished sentences. Let's be fair, it's hard not to chuckle at some of the phrasing. But funny as these moments are, and alongside the political messaging, the day's core intent, celebrating St George and the National Day, remained genuine.
What does St George mean to you?
Everything. I'm English.
And for most people, the day passed without incident.
I was asked by the journalists outside court, are you expecting trouble today on St George's Day?
No.
I said, no, I'm not. But we have got justified anger with what's been happening in our capital city.
Not that you'd know it from the coverage.
There were scuffles at the cenotaph where people celebrating St George's Day ostensibly, but actually were wearing, the England flag and had quite violent clashes with the police.
Cameras quickly zeroed in on one chaotic moment. A small group pushing through a police line, followed by horses moving into the remaining crowd, and one attendee swinging an umbrella at a horse. The short scuffle was over in under a minute, but headlines and social clips jumped at the chance to portray the entire gathering as far-right and violent.
A police horse has been hit in the middle of violence at London's St George's Day celebration. The Metropolitan Police deployed extra officers as they say far-right groups and groups linked to football clubs travelled from around the UK.
Alternative media outlets and creators pushed back against the mainstream framing, highlighting what they, like the crowds, saw as two-tier policing.
It does seem to me to be very, very much in contrast to their policing of pro-Palestine
rallies where the view, even when they are defacing statues and climbing up on the cenotaph and things.
Overzealous responses from well-equipped riot police at this relatively small event, compared with far more lenient treatment of larger, explicitly political and often volatile demonstrations.
Protests, the Palestinian situation is about the way that the police have a fear, and that's what's manifesting itself.
Police not dressed at this stage in riot gear, though later on in the evening they were dressed in riot gear. Clearly quite a dangerous situation.
You just cannot have
Only,
policing.
as I
The
understand
same
it,
behaviour
one arrest
by whoever
made.
it is needs to be met with the same policing, and that needs to be consistent and expected.
It's curious that people criticise the day for being hijacked by right-wing sentiment.
Englishness has been hijacked by the right, presumably some of those people at the Cenotaph yesterday.
Case in point.
Case in point, Exhibit A.
When under such a hostile media lens, and with disproportionately heavy policing, simply celebrating at all can't help but become a political act. In today's landscape, it's hardly surprising that St George's Day has acquired a slight edge. By the summer of the following year, with the official handling of the migrant crisis sparking outrage and unrest across the country, the idea had grown into something bigger. In 2025, Operation Raise the Colours brought the same symbols of debate once more into the public space, not through St George's Day this time, but through his flag. The St George's Cross appeared throughout the country, sprayed onto mini roundabouts and tied to lampposts. Local authorities responded quickly, sometimes spending tens of thousands of pounds to remove them. A Freedom of Information request revealed that 36 councils spent a combined £61,770 on removal alone. Yorkshire councils accounted for over 30,000, Medway in Kent nearly 12,000, and North Somerset at least 6. The reasons ranged from community cohesion and safety to dangerous road distractions in Somerset. Some councillors doubled down, saying it was money well spent, while others expressed frustration that, had the flags not been put up in the first place, the money could have gone on fixing potholes instead. Now, it's been a few years since my theory test, so I'll leave it up to you to decide which one's the bigger road safety hazard. Not every councillor took issue with the flags, but in many cases, the lines had been very clearly drawn, showing that, much like in the media, there were clear institutional priorities.
You go to
at
London
play.
today, you're more likely to see a Palestinian flag over our own flying.
But that still leaves a question we've yet to answer. Was the flag raising, and Whitehall for that matter, a genuine expression of national pride, the sudden visibility of something that normally goes unseen, or just a fringe movement, as some headlines suggest? Because St George's Day itself might offer a clue. Strip away the noise, and the polling once more tells a different story. Polls consistently show strong public support for a national holiday.
So would you like to see it as a national holiday?
I really think I would, yes.
Say yes, it should be a bank holiday.
We should celebrate St George's Day as a public holiday.
Yeah, because if you want to make it a bigger thing, then people have got to be off work, innit?
A 2006 Ipsos poll found 74% thought a national day was a good idea, and 72% were keen for it to be a bank holiday. A 2013 YouGov survey found 66% in favour, with just 11% opposed. More recently, a 2025 YouGov poll put support between 61 and 65%, depending on region, with around 20% against. In other words, the appetite is there, a well of support waiting to be tapped, if only the structure existed to support it. Even without official backing, some grassroots efforts already try to treat the 23rd of April as a national pause. Sites like stgeorgesholiday.com encourage people to pledge the day off. Some business owners choose to join in too. Small scale and inconsistent, but proof that there is willingness to act. Along with Wales, England remains one of the only 2 UK nations without an official holiday for its patron saint. And according to the polling, the public may already have an idea why.
It's like they're stopping us from celebrating in many cases.
A significant number attribute the day's low profile not to lack of interest.
It seems to be the government. They seem to not like it anymore.
But to lack of focus from those in charge. It seems then the difference with our neighbours isn't cultural will. It's institutional backing. So how long have people been trying to make St George's Day a proper public holiday? Longer than you might think. Let's rewind. The Feast of St George has been in the church calendar for centuries, rising and falling with England's religious and political tides. By 1421, the 23rd of April was recognised across England as a major feast. For medieval England, this was about as close as you could get to a national holiday. church-mandated time off for much of the population. But in modern terms, a state-backed bank holiday, that idea was still centuries away. When the Bank of England reformed its holidays in 1834, what had once been as high as 33 to 40 bank-only closures was cut back to just 4: Good Friday, May Day, All Saints' Day, and Christmas. England's first modern bank holidays finally arrived with the 1871 Bank Holidays Act: Easter Monday, Whit Monday, the August Bank Holiday, and Boxing Day. St George's Day, not on the list, and that omission sparked a quiet but persistent frustration. The Royal Society of St George we've encountered before became the first major organised push to place St George's Day at the heart of English national identity. Services, dinners, flag flying, rose wearing, and persistent lobbying for a bank holiday became their mission. But Parliament remained unmoved. Meanwhile, across the Irish Sea, St Patrick's Day was officially recognised in 1903. England was already being left behind. Over the decades, attempts kept coming. In 1914, MP Colonel Byrne proposed a bank holiday. Prime Minister Asquith, successive governments have considered it and decided against it. In the 1920s, MP Lieutenant Colonel Croft suggested a school holiday to teach English history. No change followed. In the 1950s, MPs pushed for the St George's flag to fly on the 23rd of April. Queen Elizabeth II approved it in 1959. Symbolic, but still not a holiday. 1978. Some Conservatives suggested replacing the new May Day bank holiday with St George's Day. Parliament voted it down, 148 against 124, another near miss. Each effort carried hope and disappointment, building a pattern that would become very familiar in the 21st century. It wasn't until the turn of the millennium that St George's Day saw a renewed burst of cultural energy. Organisations like English Heritage and the RSSG revitalised campaigns. In 2006, former England cricketer Ian Botham led a campaign that reportedly gained over 400,000 supporters, culminating in a petition delivered to 10 Downing Street. Meanwhile, Scotland was moving ahead. St Andrew's Day became a bank holiday in 2007, joining St Patrick. England still waiting. The contrast was becoming harder to ignore, and it appeared some politicians were finally starting to take notice. By 2009, St George's Day finally had a moment in the spotlight. London's new mayor, Boris Johnson, pushed to promote national celebrations, giving the 23rd of April an unusual visibility in the lead-up to the 2010 general election. The day became a subtle battleground of English identity. Conservatives and the BNP both sought to associate themselves with the symbolism of St George, though in very different ways. Soft patriotism versus overt nationalism. Johnson made a point of refusing to share a platform with BNP leaders, signalling the idea that the day could be patriotic without being considered extreme. Make of that what you will. For the first time in centuries, St George seemed to step out of the history books and into the national consciousness. David Cameron and Boris Johnson attended London's celebrations, and the BBC reported a pageant of St George has taken place in the City of London for the first time in 425 years. Cameron pledged,
"From now on, we should always properly celebrate St George's Day,"
and even suggested considering it for bank holiday status. Momentum was building. After decades of lobbying, petitions, and symbolic gestures, it looked like St George's Day might finally get the recognition it deserved. But as the election dust settled, the familiar pattern reasserted itself. Promises remained just that. Subsequent campaigns echoed the same story. In 2012, MPs including Richard Graham renewed calls for parity with St Patrick's Day and St Andrew's Day, again without success. In 2017, Labour's manifesto under Jeremy Corbyn proposed 4 new public holidays, one for each UK patron saint. When Starmer's Labour came to power, that pledge went unrealised. In 2024, new petitions attracted over 70,000 signatures, and MP Andrew Rosendale,
"Can we please have a public holiday for St George's Day?"
hosted a St George's Day celebration in Parliament alongside the Royal Society of St George. Still, nothing changed. Over a century of proposals, petitions, speeches and symbolic acts had yet to secure a single official public holiday for England's patron saint. Political leaders repeatedly tried to harness public sentiment for St George's Day and repeatedly failed to follow through, leaving St George caught between a growing national affection and institutional neglect. So why has this idea struggled in Parliament for so long? Some point to a lack of political will. identity politics, or a general cultural unease around the idea of Englishness itself. Whatever opinions we might have on the reason, one thing is undeniable. Compared to Scotland, Wales and Ireland, England's National Day has never had the same level of institutional recognition, helping turn a date on the calendar into something people actually care about. England has the public enthusiasm, but without institutional muscle, even widespread support can't turn St George's Day into a national holiday. Across Europe and beyond, whereas Saints' Day survives, it's organised, embedded and repeated. Visibility, coordination, government involvement, local buy-in, media support, cultural weight. So, how does England stack up when it comes to investing in its own national day? Because when we talk about institutional backing, we're not just talking warm words, we're talking cold, hard cash. And once again, we might have something to learn from our neighbours. Look closely, and the difference is written straight into the budgets. If you really want to understand what a country values, follow the money. First, the big hitter. Ireland doesn't just celebrate St Patrick's Day, it builds around it. At the national level, the scale is hard to ignore. In 2023, Dublin's 4-day St Patrick's Festival ran on a budget of €3.5 million, with roughly €2 million in public funding. That includes €1.4 million from the National Tourism Agency and Dublin City Council, and another €600,000 from the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sport and Media. A bit of a mouthful, but remember that department when we get back to England. And it doesn't stop at Dublin. Across the country, local authorities consistently put real money behind the day. Cork's Parade, $170,000. County Kerry, over $22,000 for local festivals. Fermanagh and Omagh, an extra £10,000 just to expand events. This is an ecosystem, not a one-off project. And it goes beyond Ireland's borders. St Patrick's Day is actively funded as a global export. In 2023 alone, the Irish government spent nearly €75,000 promoting the day overseas, through diplomatic events, cultural programmes and international festivals. Local councils even send representatives abroad to promote Irish culture. In 2022, that added up to around €320,000. At home, the long-term planning tells the same story. Cork City Council has put up to €1.5 million on the table to manage festivals through to 2029. This isn't symbolic support, it's coordinated, sustained investment, designed to make the day visible, repeatable, and impossible to ignore. And the payoff? St Patrick's Day is estimated to generate around €58 million for the Irish economy every year. Money talks, and in Ireland, it's shouting from the rooftops. Scotland doesn't go as big as Ireland, but it doesn't need to. Here, St Andrew's Day is a national cultural project. The government treats it as the opening act of the winter festival season, which stretches through Hogmanay and Burns Night, all combined into one winter festival budget. £315,000 in 2014, £390,000 in 2015, £430,000 in 2021. Funding is smaller, but strategic. Concerts, ceilidhs, torchlight parades and community-led events, all carefully positioned to get maximum cultural impact, with grants to support local celebrations, which also see independent investment. In St Andrews, business groups have been known to deliver tens of thousands for fireworks, markets and parades. The sums don't rival Dublin, but they go a long way, and experts estimate St Andrew's Day could generate up to £40 million in untapped hospitality revenue. A reminder that strategic spending can create big returns without massive budgets. In short, Scotland proves that a central framework and smart local investment can make a national day visible, cohesive and culturally meaningful, even if the economic payoff is yet to be fully realised. Wales may be smaller, but it punches well above its weight. 2026 marks a major milestone. The Welsh Government announced a £1 million fund for nationwide St David's Day celebrations. That's serious money for a national day without a bank holiday. Local authorities add their own contributions. Gwynedd, £200,000 in 2022 for celebrations and the staff leave we mentioned earlier. Merthyr Tydfil, £25,000 for community events in 2019. Llanelli's St David's Food and Drink Festival, £14,500 in grant funding. And then there's Swansea with its 2-day Croeso Festival, tens of thousands of visitors attend, streets filled with food, live music and family activities, where small grants, council coordination and staffholder fees combine to make what often turns into an unofficial St David's week. Even at this scale, the impact of funding, or the lack of it, can make or break celebrations. In 2020, Cardiff's parade went ahead without the usual council support. It was almost a month before the first COVID lockdown, but even so, attendance dropped from thousands to just a few hundred. The lesson? Even modest investment can transform the day, while coordinated national support signals Wales's determination to make St David's Day a proud national celebration, all without a bank holiday. Through education, media, local government action and cultural confidence, St David's Day has been embedded across generations, a lesson England has yet to fully learn. And then there's England. St George's Day? What stands out isn't a headline figure, it's the difficulty of finding one at all. There's no dedicated national budget, no central government lead, no clearly defined funding stream. Instead, what spending does exist is scattered across local councils or bodies, usually folded into broader events budgets and rarely itemised under the day's name. Where other nations proudly announce their spending in press releases and features, the figures are conspicuously quiet in England's case. That fragmentation isn't accidental. It reflects how the day's treated, not as a major civic festival, but an optional add-on. The lack of a coherent national picture isn't a data problem. It is the picture. And that silence makes the figures that do surface with a little digging all the more revealing, especially when set against the scale of support seen by our neighbours. It's time to pull on England's purse strings. So, where to begin? We've seen how Ireland treats its National Day as a valuable cultural and economic asset, and how in just 1 year it drew an impressive €600,000 from the country's Department of Tourism, Culture, and the rest. So what about England's equivalent? Between 2004 and 2008, 5 full years under Blair and Brown, the UK Department for Culture, Media and Sport spent a grand total of 230. No, not 230 grand, 230 of these. That's right, 2008, £116, 2007, 114, and the previous 3 years,
nothing at all, nothing at all, nothing at all.
Apparently the Department of Culture sets a very high bar for what counts as culture. England, unlike Ireland, Scotland or Wales, hasn't bothered treating St George's Day as the cultural or economic asset it could be. Bank holiday or public funding, those in central government just aren't invested, in any sense of the word. But it wasn't always this way. Let's take a quick leap back in time to the festival's heyday, because we actually have financial records as far back as the late 14th and early 15th centuries, when royal expenditure for St George's Day rivaled that of Christmas. Royal household accounts show the average daily spend on ordinary days around £20 to £40, and the Feast of St George, 150. Significantly better than Blair's Department of Culture, even before inflation. And it wasn't a one-off. In 1404, the Crown spent £211 on St George's Day, only 13 less than Christmas that year. In modern terms, that's somewhere between £150,000 to £380,000, depending how you calculate it. That's no small figure. Even past its peak, by 1437, St George's Day was still the second costliest royal celebration, just ahead of Easter and Pentecost. This gives us a great idea of how highly it was valued by the royals of the time. Fast forward to the present day, and even the Downing Street Christmas party can count on more government support. But if local councils are left to pick up the bill, what about England's capital? Dublin, Edinburgh and Cardiff all lead the way for their saints and nations. Surely London does the same for St George. Well, it seems it does. London has an annual event, in Trafalgar Square no less, organised by the Greater London Authority, the GLA. So if we're following the money, who decides what gets spent? Well, the GLA is split between the Mayor, who sets strategy and controls budgets, and the London Assembly, who provides oversight and accountability. Within the multi-billion-pound GLA budget, the Mayor directly controls the programme budget, which since 2017 has grown from under £1 billion to £3 to £4 billion today, with roughly £22 million earmarked for community, cultural and arts events. Yet somehow, in all that cash, St George's Day is far from central. For centuries, the days had competition from other occasions, Shakespeare Day and the UN's World Book Day on the same date, and in the wider calendar, competing for attention with Easter, Empire Day and May Day. Fast forward to modern London, and it's still the same story, just different competition. Across the past 2 decades, GLA spending on St George's Day has hovered between around 65 to 140,000 per year at its lowest and highest points. And even at the highest, that's often still a fraction of what other cultural celebrations routinely receive. St Patrick's Day in 2022 saw the GLA contribute £175,000 towards the festival. And celebrating roots beyond the British Isles, Black History Month and Africa Day have also historically commanded 6-figure budgets. While pet projects like the Rise Festival, revived by Ken Livingstone as a celebration of diversity and anti-racism, pulled in £288,000. In that same year, St George's Day and Shakespeare Day shared just £65,000 between them. And in recent years, the trend has only intensified. London Pride has seen recurring grants of £125,000 in both 2024 and 2025. And last year alone, Black on the Square was back with a whopping £280,000 behind it.
What I love is for the last 3 weekends, we had Black Pride, Carnival, and now Black in the Square. And that's what we need to have. That's what needs to happen here in London. Keep it up, Sadiq.
That's a lot of money for the London Mayor to spend each year on celebrating overseas national days, sexual orientation, and, let's face it, literal skin colour. And considering across the year, beyond those already mentioned, the GLA runs a packed calendar of events. Eid, Baisakhi, Diwali, funding Latin American festivals, Hanukkah, Chinese New Year, Notting Hill Carnival, to name just a few. It means that alongside the more familiar traditions of Armed Forces Day, Remembrance Day, the Mayor's Carol Service and New Year's Eve, the figures we've seen so far are just a drop in the bucket. And guess what? Would you believe it? St George's Day wasn't even always on that list. Let's take a stroll down memory lane to see how London's flagship St George's Day event came to be what it is today. The story of St George's Day in Trafalgar Square begins with a small act of protest. In 2002, then Mayor Ken Livingstone announced £100,000 plans for St Patrick's Day, complete with green-dyed fountains, while St George's Day, completely ignored. In response, the pressure group Campaign for an English Parliament dyed the fountains red, turning civic neglect into a bold grassroots display. From that spark, a new tradition emerged. The next year, the campaign group jumped enough bureaucratic hurdles to hold the first ever St George's Feast in Covent Garden. Privately organised and supported by a modest £2,500 from the Cross of St George Association, it was small, but a labour of love. By 2005, celebrations were becoming established across Covent Garden and beyond. The GLA stepped in to contribute that low-end £65,000 figure we mentioned earlier. £15,000 of that split between Covent Garden and the RSSG parade, and the remaining £50,000 earmarked for Shakespeare's Globe. A win for the Bard, taking the lion's share. As the years went on, the GLA took a more active role. By 2008, over £68,500 went into marketing and cultural programming, attracting an estimated 15,000 people throughout the day. In 2009, with Boris Johnson now championing St George's Day, spending reached a new high, £95,000 for a concert entertaining 25,000 people, by which time Covent Garden made way for a full transition to the flagship concerts in Trafalgar Square, before hitting that record £140,000 in 2010. The Mayor noted around 30,000 people attended this year's commemoration, up from last year and more than double under the previous Mayor. I was delighted that there were over 50 events across 16 boroughs, double last year's. The scale and promotion dwarfed what had come before, and it seemed the Trafalgar event was not only growing, but it was spreading across the city. Even long-lost historic traditions were being honoured. A horseback riding wove through the streets of Square Mile for the first time since Queen Elizabeth I. St George and the famous stories King, Daughter, and even the Lamb led by a maiden all joined, not seen in the City of London for 425 years, escorted by a slightly more modern entourage, and some of that old world spirit was brought back into the square itself. Through the mid-2010s, Trafalgar Square's St George's Day celebrations evoked a medieval carnival dropped into the heart of London. Red and white bunting draped all around, food stalls offering hog roasts, pies, cheeses, fudge and ice cream, with cookery demonstrations adding to the spectacle. One year, a huge 250-person banqueting table stretched between the fountains, watched over by a 5-metre-high dragon. But the entertainment carried the day. A bandstand in front of Nelson's column hosted brass bands, choirs, medieval and music hall performers, alongside young buskers from mayoral competitions. Small and up-and-coming acts that celebrated the English theme and the community feel. Jesters, jugglers and ribbon dancers roamed the crowds. Shadow puppets enacted dragon-slaying tales, and children joined in with the night-themed games and crafts. By 2016, the format was flexible enough to incorporate the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death. Globe actors recited sonnets, and costume characters mingled with the festival goers. Folklore, family fun, and literary flourish blended seamlessly. And this time, the funding wasn't mainly filtered through the bard. St George remained front and centre. The mayor called it a superb family day out, a description that captured the tone. Welcoming, celebratory, and the more time went on, carefully curated. When Sadiq Khan took office as mayor in 2017, the day was billed as London's
biggest ever feast of St George.
The main stage featured live music from the Military Wives Choirs, folk legend Ralph McTell, and dance performances including Morris dancers and a Ceilidh jam workshop, brought together food and entertainment. Yet a Freedom of Information request later revealed the GLA's contribution was down to £98,000, roughly the same as a decade earlier, before Boris came under fire for funding the move to the square in the first place. The biggest ever PR was doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and it's interesting to note how funding came to be administered. Where grants were once given to organisers, the Trafalgar Square event ended up officially GLA delivered. What does that mean? Well, it's under tight control. The GLA decide exactly where the money goes, what to programme, what's allowed, and more importantly, what's not.
I'm sorry?
I've been asked you to leave.
To leave?
Yes, or put the camera away. Did they say no professional cameras here?
A public event that's not so much backed as stage managed. And while some traditional themes still featured, with Khan at the helm there was a noticeable shift in style. The spontaneous energy of acts ranging from small and unknown to more established niche traditional or historical performers, the distinctly English communal feel gradually gave way to performances that were often polished in style rather than substance, carefully staged and highly curated, with diverse programming taking centre stage. Not just a Morris dancer troupe, but a female one. Not just a brass band, but a hip-hop one. Not just folk dance, but folk dance remixed, a fusion of maypole, clogging, Ceilidh, street, house and breakdance, with a hint of African and Bollywood, Spanish spoken word poetry, a cappella pop songs and hip-hop dance theatre, with the smell of Chinese and kebabs wafting through the air. All while St George is stuck over at the selfie booth, next to the Easter bonnet workshop. Maybe still a nice day out for the family, but it seemed like tradition for tradition's sake was no longer enough. Instead, a clear push for everything to have a modern twist.
We are really, really proud to be upholding an old tradition, but making it modern and putting our own spin on it.
Either with more commercial appeal, or to be more
multicultural and diverse.
Diverse, up-to-date and inclusive.
Because it's a celebration of Englishness, but Englishness has historically always been about looking outwards as much as looking inwards. Here are traditions that have come recently in the last few decades. Here are traditions that have been here for hundreds of years. How can we enjoy all of those all together, and how can we make that as outward-facing as possible?
We are a mixture of everybody these days, and it's lovely to have everyone's input and their kind of take on St George's Day as well.
Just like Trafalgar Square, hosting celebrations imported from around the world, English tradition itself is just a space to be occupied. And with this, something the organisers don't want us to forget, what it now means to be English.
We know where the beating heart of England is, don't we? It is London. And the message I want the whole world to hear is a message we've been sending out for hundreds and hundreds of years. And that is London is open. London is open to talent. London is open to people. London is open to ideas. But we're going to carry on showing the world.
I've had open iftars in Newcastle, in Manchester, in Bradford, in Birmingham, in Coventry, in London. They've been in the Royal
Not just the biggest iftar taking place in London, not just the biggest iftar in Europe,
not just the biggest iftar in the continent of Europe, but the biggest iftar in Western world.
Does that sound about right, Sadiq?
The truth is, it's all these things and so much more.
A new meaning for the day itself.
For me, that goes to the heart of what it means to be English.
All in all, 2017 and the years that followed looked less like a boost to the day and more like a rebranding exercise. Not just for Trafalgar Square, but for the cultural space St George represents. And once more, the FOI requests confirm what you might have guessed by now. The 2017 funding was only for the event in the square. Nothing at all went to any other St George's celebrations across London that year. A far cry from the hopeful signs of revival we saw back in 2010. These celebrations are planned like meetings, booked into a designated space for a few hours, risk assessed, stewarded, and promptly cleared away, so normal life can resume and the organisers can prepare for the next of the year's festival slots. That's all you're getting. But maybe that's the point.
Happy St George's Day!
So London does have a flagship event. One that's slowly and reluctantly been allowed to happen, but only on the condition that nothing else has to change. But it's not all bad news. Across the country, other events do take place. Among the most prominent, English Heritage arguably leads the way, hosting St George's Day festivals at its historic sites, a key date in their annual calendar most years, with Rest Park acting as the flagship celebration, one that appears to have been going on in some form since the late 90s. A weekend of shows, living history encampments, jugglers, jesters, falconry displays, muskets, cannon fire, horseback jousting, gladiators and sword fights, culminates in a legendary battle between a fully armoured St George and a fearsome dragon. Almost 10,000 visitors turn up to enjoy the spectacle. The historical focus offers a more grounded, genuine celebration of Englishness than Trafalgar Square, putting families in touch with the kind of England St George was once central to. Children can join in too, training to be knights of the realm, trying on armour, attending sword school, or playing heritage games their great-grandparents might have enjoyed. It seems this year's event might have fallen by the wayside, but it's not all. Thankfully, London isn't the only city showing up for St George. Where St George's Day survives, it does so less through national strategy and more through local initiative. Across the country, a handful of landmarks light up red and white, from the Mersey Gateway Bridge to town centres like Stockton-on-Tees. In Manchester, a long-running community parade winds through the streets with floats, dragons, and St George himself. Quaint by big city standards, but full of local character. In Derby, since at least 2023, the marketplace fills with workshops, mock battles and puppet shows. Meanwhile in Leicester, festivities have been running since 2009, complete with knights, dragons and last year, to the amusement of locals, even a cardboard box Roman forum, built and knocked down in the city centre. In unassuming towns like Morley in Yorkshire and Newport in Shropshire, lively traditions continue year after year. And at Tamworth Castle, the grounds have once again played host to jousting, a medieval spectacle. Some of these events run on surprisingly modest budgets. Leicester City Council allocated just over £10,000 to support its 2012 festival. Pretty tiny compared with some of the spending for smaller towns in the devolved nations. Other councils have pulled back entirely. In Sandwell, West Midlands, funding was withdrawn in 2009 after officials claimed its celebrations had attracted racist elements. But the events that do go ahead keep St George's Day alive in the places that really care, even if they lack the scale or prominence of Trafalgar Square. And it's not just the councils themselves. Beyond city halls, St George's Day is often most animated by independent groups who claim it as their own. Solihull still hosts what's often billed as the world's largest unofficial St George's Day parade. Scout and guide districts across the country organise parades and promise renewal ceremonies, with beavers, cubs, brownies and explorers marching through town centres behind brass bands and banners before gathering in parks or churches. Historical reenactment societies stage mock battles and medieval encampments. Morris sides like the Ewell St Mary's Morrismen tour pubs and market squares from morning to dusk, bells jangling, sticks clashing and handkerchiefs flying. Community arts groups, such as Same Sky in Kent, build entire dragon parades from weeks of school workshops involving hundreds of pupils. And in towns and villages, local pubs keep the spirit alive, with live music, themed nights, and the occasional quirky celebration idea thrown in for good measure. In some places, the tone turns delightfully eccentric. Rotary clubs, like the one in Pinner, run St George's Day wheelbarrow races through the high streets. Even during 2020's lockdown, online events popped up. with traditions like mummers plays making an appearance, a centuries-old tradition surviving into the digital age. None of this is centrally directed. It's largely volunteer-led, often improvised, sometimes fairly chaotic. But it shows that where official strategy is thin, pockets of civil society fill the space with pageantry, with folklore, and with a wonderful streak of English oddity. Across England, the public often has to step in when institutions won't. And occasionally these efforts still meet real-world obstacles, forcing communities to take matters further into their own hands. In Romford, a scout parade reportedly running since 1954 was nearly cancelled this year, 2026, because the Metropolitan Police wouldn't provide traffic management, despite being just a 15-20 minute children's parade through a local town centre. To be fair to the police, maybe they didn't have enough riot gear to spare. But a local business owner stepped in with £9,000 of his own money to keep the parade alive. A small gesture on the national stage, but a huge one for a single person to make, that speaks volumes about how English civic pride is maintained from the ground up when institutions keep falling short. What these smaller groups and determined individuals preserve isn't scale, but rhythm. The idea that the day returns in some small way, year after year, whether or not anyone is watching. And in a way, that's the point of any real holiday. Maybe it doesn't need huge backing to survive at all. But wait, could things be changing? Rotherham is doing something unprecedented. £66,000 is set aside for St George's Day this year, matching the GLA's spending on the first few London events, and not far below what London spent in more recent years. Rotherham is at least showing a glimpse of what's possible. Will other towns follow suit in the coming years? Only time will tell. But maybe it's a promising start. And that, in a rather large nutshell, is the current state of St George's Day in England. So, we've looked at the data, toured the British Isles, counted the money, and seen the celebrations. What have we learned? First, the quiet on St George's Day is more than a feeling. Yes, there are celebrations, even in Trafalgar Square, but for most of England, the 23rd of April passes like any other day, and most of the public unaware when it comes and goes. And yet somehow, beneath that neglect, it seems there may be a silent majority who quietly wishes the day could be something more, and has done for centuries. Now compare that to Scotland and Ireland, whose national days are well funded and widely celebrated, and we see England as the sad anomaly it is. Public backing? It's nowhere near the level of even our smallest neighbours. What if we matched Wales's £1 million investment today? On a per capita basis, that's £18 million for England. Imagine what that would do for St George. Imagine if the day was still second only to Christmas, a true highlight of the year, economically, socially, culturally. Take a moment to really picture that. Because we don't have it. Instead, today's celebrations feel tentative at best. Many hesitate to even fly the flag, worried it might offend, draw criticism, or worse. Even small gestures, for those who do remember, are approached with caution rather than pride. And let's be honest, this simply doesn't happen for any other major British holiday. Am I saying we should put aside £18 million for St George's Day? Considering the state of the country at large, it hardly seems justifiable for taxpayer money to go towards any holiday at this point. But the comparison with the sheer amount of cash being thrown at so many other communities and causes is a clear indicator of what's going on here. Year after year, it's the same story. Sideline traditions, events co-opted for ideological messaging, and a media that either ignores or actively undermines the day. And it all hints at something bigger. A not so subtle policing of what it means to be English and who gets to show it in public. And that, as we'll see in future videos, goes far beyond St George's Day itself. For now though, the story is clear. We truly are a people without a national day. We're losing grip on our own traditions, ones that should be central to our identity. And let's not forget the little things. A couple of red lines on a mini roundabout that pose a far greater threat to the drivers of Somerset than our nation's crumbling infrastructure. These are all symptoms of a kind of cultural sickness we really shouldn't ignore. So, what's next? The good news? Enthusiasm lives on in the people across the country, still marking the day in their own small and unusual ways. And Rotherham offers a rare ray of hope. That's a sentence I never thought I'd say. The question now is whether these efforts could be amplified, whether St George's Day could, and indeed should, become the visible, unifying celebration it has the potential to be. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you made it this far. Could we do it? What would it take? And what would it look like to truly celebrate St George's Day as a nation? In the next episode, we'll explore how St. George is celebrated elsewhere in the world, trace the day's evolution across centuries, and get a sense of what it really felt like to be there on the 23rd of April throughout England's history. Who knows, it might even inspire you to join in, come up with your own new traditions, or book a plane ticket and see it for yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.